Hi, I'm Greg Schaffer, and welcome to the Virtual CISO Moment. Brad Mathis joins us today. He is Senior Information Security Consultant. Brad, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
So I'd like to start. I already know some of your history. We've been acquainted for several years. We've worked on a few things together, but would like to hear, though, about your beginning, how and why you got started in information security and technology and cybersecurity, and why, and take us all the way up to where you are.
Will do. Your video's freezing a bit, so I hope it's not on my end. So I'm going to just start going.
We'll
So
just
as you
rock
can
and
tell
roll.
by my
Sometimes those things happen, and that's okay.
awesome,
The local recordings will pick it up, because I know as soon as I
perfect.
started talking, like bring us your story.
That works. Well, I hope we have a few hours because as you can tell by the gray hair, I've been at it for a while. Um, so this is an interesting year for me because it's 40 years in the industry, 40 years being married, and I'm still alive. So taking me back, let's see, I was 17 years old, living in a small town in Southern Illinois, and graduated high school. I was a young graduate. 2 weeks later, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I ended up in Evansville, Indiana, at a tech school, 2 year tech school, to study electronics engineering technology. Have I used that in my career? Barely. But I, like I say, didn't really know what to do. My plan was to come to Indiana. It was to live here for a couple of years and then go back, and find my life. And then, of course, I found my wife up here in Indiana, and I've been here ever since. So I started, like a lot of people, got to start way back then because there was no such thing back then as a cybersecurity degree or even an IT degree. Really, it was all in programming and things like that. So I got involved in basically computer repair, networking. Eventually, once networking became a thing, I am that old, and then I really enjoyed it. I remember my second job seeing my first virus, and that was exciting. It was something that there was an older guy I worked with that he was pretty much full time out at an aluminum factory, on like a staff aug type situation. And he had this computer that kept doing weird things. And of course, I had read things. I was young, I was, cocky. And I said, "Oh, I bet it's got one of those viruses I keep hearing about." And he's like, "Oh, that's just hokum. That's hokum. That's not real." And so, anyway, he had replaced everything. So I said, "Well, bring it in to me." And it was one of those that I found out he had replaced the power supply, the motherboard, everything, the hard drive. I said, "Well, when you replace the hard drive," I said, "Well, did you just wipe it out fresh?" She goes, "No, I backed everything up and I put it on the new one." And I was like, "Okay, let me see it." So sure enough, McAfee was open source at the time, and I downloaded their scanner that they had, and I came up with the Jerusalem B virus. And it was just so cool because it would cause the letters to drop off the screen. And so one thing led to another. That kind of got me excited in security in general because I thought, wow, that was, it was kind of like a prank program, but it was still cool to watch. So kind of neat. And then, along comes networking. And then eventually this thing called Windows, which was, I didn't think it was going to last, but it did. But started, networking computers together. I was seeing, I always liked the interconnectivity. I like seeing how things work. And then I do not remember at what point. Go ahead.
Just talking about Windows and networking, I think most youngins today don't understand that when Windows first came out, networking was not native, at least not TCP/IP. You had to load a stack on top of that. They had their proprietary NetBUI networking, which I don't think it's in use anywhere anymore. Maybe it still is in some obscure instances, but I know this almost sounds a little bit like, well, I walked to school both ways uphill through snow, 5 miles
Yes.
type of story. But it's true. It actually took a lot to get a computer networked up back like when Windows came out 30 years ago, Windows 95, right? Or before Windows 95, with Windows 3.1.1 for work groups and that sort of thing.
That's for sure. It's
So
it's been quite a
didn't mean to
ride.
stop your story, but I
Oh,
had to.
no, totally fine. Interrupt, man. um, but yeah, it was so fun because, I said I started working on computers and things like that. Technically, when I first started working, I was working on dedicated word processing systems. I was
Uh,
born in 1965, and one of them that I worked on, I think it came out in the early 70s, and law firms would keep it forever because it was like thousands upon thousands of dollars. But it was a brand name called Videc, VYDEC. And I think Exxon Office Systems, yeah, they had an office systems company, had acquired them. And if it was fully loaded, I remember there were like, I don't even remember. For some reason, I'm thinking close to 100 circuit boards, and it had several power supplies because it had a separate power supply for the +5, -5, +12, all of that. And I was doing component level repair on these things because there was no like parts anymore. So you would have to go to the electronics shop, find a transistor, find a capacitor. So it was a lot of fun. Um, but at some point, so I was working for a company and I was spending a lot of time with a healthcare organization doing some work for them. And they kept asking me, when are you going to come work for us? And I was like, nah, I'm good. Well, eventually they, talked me into going and interviewing. And that was my first foray into the enterprise world. So getting out of the, VAR, whatever you want to call it, went there. And that's where I learned a lot about networking. I went there, and of course it was Token Ring at the time, if anybody remembers that.
Absolutely.
That silly thing that was never going to catch on.
Yeah.
So, but
Very big plugs. I remember that. Yeah.
oh yeah, they called them hermaphroditic plugs because it didn't matter which way you plugged them in, and it was interesting because I would build those connectors. But anyway, that networking, Token Ring, all of that was pretty exciting. And somewhere along my career, and I do not remember when I did this, but I read the book from Clifford Stoll, The Cuckoo's Egg. And I don't know if you've read it, but
I
Cliff
have not.
Stoll is a unique fellow. He was at Berkeley University and basically found somebody that was in their system because he found a math error that was very small.
I
And
have heard of that story. Yeah. And he was
yes,
obsessed, like trying to find it, right?
he was. It's kind of like me because I'm old school. I still balance a checkbook once a month, and some people are like, what's a checkbook? But I do that, and it's got to be to the penny. And that's how Cliff was. Well, there was something about Cliff Stoll's tenacity and following up on it. And he didn't even have an IT background. He was just a student, working at the university. And he ended up finding this international espionage type thing. And the story reads like a spy novel in a sense. And if you ever get a chance, either read the book or even go look on YouTube for one of his interview videos, because he kind of goes over it in some of those. That is what I think really triggered and excited me to focus more on security. So over the years, I had a lot of firsts. Like I used to work for, I had transferred to the parent company, which was Ascension Health. I worked there for many years. And so, I was the one that set up the first internet connection that actually had we had a FTP server, we had a NNTP server, we had all these different things that I had no idea what I was doing, but I basically spun up the IBM AIX, which was, Unix, kind of like today's Linux, spun those up, had the services running, had everything, facing the internet, set up the original firewalls, which at the time, that was when Checkpoint was on top of the world. And the original firewalls ran on a Solaris Spark station. Once again, you just kind of learn by the, basically by the seat of your pants. And I learned a lot. And then at one time in my career, I ended up getting to go to a boot camp, which some boot camps are overrated because they're there just to make you pass a test or something. This boot camp I went to was actually in Raleigh, North Carolina, and IBM put it on. And it was on their route. They called it router boot camp because IBM used to have some really awesome routers before Cisco bought all their patents. And so I went to this school. It was like 2 weeks. And I thought, yeah, they're just going to teach me how to configure the router. Oh my gosh, they started and made us totally understand the OSI model, made us totally understand the TCP IP stack, how to subnet, how to do variable masking. I learned so much in those 2 weeks that has stuck with me ever since. And so anyway, I was with Ascension Health the hospital, probably for I don't know, 11 years or so between the two. And then I decided at one point, they decided to outsource. And of course, that never works when it's a big company, because their deal at the time, way back, was we're in healthcare. We're not we're not an IT company, so they outsourced. And of course, the day the outsourcing took place, I even saw it change in the parking lot. There were about 200 of us that worked local in Evansville because we were the core IT organization for the company. And I used to see, I'd walk out in the parking lot like at 6 o'clock at night, and there'd be like cars there, people still working. It wasn't because they were, like forced to work. It was because they owned something. They really enjoyed what they did, and they would stick through just to make sure things were ready for the next day. As soon as they became basically just a number with a large outsourcing organization, within a week, I would walk out at 5 o'clock, 5:01, parking lot would be almost empty because nobody felt
Wow.
appreciated anymore. Yeah.
Wow.
So I stayed there for maybe a couple of months, if that, and I decided I wanted to go out on my own. So I was like, I'm kind of done with this. I don't feel that anybody's appreciated anymore at this organization, and I'm not throwing shade against them because, I mean, they made a business decision. But I ended up going out on my own. I had a LLC called Integrity Driven Business Solutions, and I decided to do that just to see what I could do. And it was going really well. It started off kind of slow. I was found out what it was like to starve just a little bit. Started off a little slow, but then it started picking up. And like one of the contracts I worked was really awesome. It was a big project up in Manhattan with one of the large financial institutions. I was there as a subcontractor through IBM at the time, and had a great time. I was starting to make some money. I was starting to see some revenue. Then I started getting phone calls from people about this role that had opened up at a bank, and a large bank, Midwest. They're still around, very large. And they told me, hey, this bank is hiring. I said, I'm done with enterprise. I really don't want to go back. And they told me what it was. It was before the term CISO was really a thing. It was Network Information Security Officer. So basically, I was like the corporate network security manager. And so once I had like 3 different people call me saying, hey, this job is open, I think you'd be a perfect fit for it, I was like, oh, what the heck? So
that's a sign.
Not even trying. I put a resume in, got the interview, ended up getting the job, and I was there for several more years, and
awesome.
And had a blast. I had like the dream team working for me. It was kind of cool because there were a few guys on my team that they didn't really need managed. They were so good at what they did, and they just made me look good. But I also hope to try to improve their lives as well. And it was just a case where at the time, I thought I would probably retire from there. And then it was a case where they're publicly traded. You have to answer to the shareholders, which I totally understand. And they ended up having a system-wide reduction in force. Basically, I didn't take any offense to it because when it happened, I thought it was just a spreadsheet exercise. Basically, they had a situation to where you're looking at middle to upper management saying, these might be duplicated. Let's eliminate them. Let's flip it over and see who the names are. So I remember when my boss at the time, he was a senior VP of the organization, had a meeting on a Friday. Friday morning meetings are always concerning. And when I walked in, I saw the HR person, and they both almost had tears in their eyes. It's like they did not want to do this. And when I walked in, my heart sunk, not because I thought I was going to lose my job. I knew there was discussions about trying to cut costs. I thought they were going to ask me to decide to eliminate one of my people. And that was going to kill me. I couldn't do it. And so then when they said my role was eliminated, of course, my heart sunk again, but I also had this wave of relief because I knew that the people on my team were still going to be there. And of course, it hit me hard because it was 2011. I had my daughter was getting married that September. This was in January when they let me know. And I thought, oh, great. she's getting married at a country club, a really nice place, and, plated dinner and probably 250 people on the guest list. How am I going to do this? It worked out really well. one thing that I have to praise the organization for was they, a lot of times when you're in that type of role, your role is eliminated, they walk you out the door. That was not the case. They were very respectful. My boss was very open. He said, you've got 30 days. He said, take as much time as you want for interviews, for job research, whatever. All we ask is that you help, make sure that, things that maybe is tribal knowledge that only that you're passing it along.
Well, that's what I was going to ping on. It's just like they obviously had an interest of you not leaving immediately because of that tribal knowledge, and I like the way that they did that. Any lessons for other folks out there as far as like that are considering like implementing a RIF?
Treat your people like humans. Yeah. Never, ever, ever, as the person being riffed, burn a bridge. Because if I had burned a bridge, that would have impacted me with later activities. Because
this is what led you to Schroeder, Keller Schroeder.
Yeah. So I was a client of Keller Schroeder for quite a while, and I loved the organization. The integrity was there, the honesty, the clear and candid communication, all of that was there that I saw from the client side. So the person that I ended up reporting to, who's now currently our president, he knew that I had lost my role. He reached out. He said, "Hey, Brad, we've been wanting to start a security practice for quite some time." And he said, and I knew they had performed security services, but it was really just another hat that like a network engineer, network consultants, whatever would do. And I said, well, hey, I appreciate it. Give me some time. I said, I've got 30 days and I don't want to just jump on the first thing. Although, that was definitely, I was like, oh, good. This might be a good thing. I reached out. I had different opportunities. I had a few offers. One of them was security industry. He's industry known. I don't want to say his name, but basically he had reached out and said, hey, I've got an opportunity for you. He said, you only have to work about, 3 to 6 months out of the year. You're going to be making way more than you are now, but it's in United Arab Emirates. And I'm like, I'll pass. Yeah. But,
I spent 6 months in the UAE. It's like, but that was more military, not
exactly.
But you're so you're with Keller Schroeder right now, and I pronounced it correctly,
yes.
Right? And
I'm sorry.
I pronounced it correctly, right?
Yeah, you did. Keller Schroeder.
I think I might have said Schroeder.
That's okay. All right. I won't crucify you yet.
I'll review the recording. But I know that one of the things that you do there, and this is where I wanted to dig into, is that you do some virtual CISO work, which of course that's something that I do as well too. And I often find that, and particularly when you get prospect calls, that there's like many misconceptions about what the organizations that are calling what they think that a vCISO does or doesn't do. What are some of those biggest misconceptions that you've experienced in the vCISO world?
So as far as the term vCISO, while we've been doing security services for quite some time, it's typically for a long time has been more on a consulting basis, project basis, compliance gap analysis, things like that. We finally, jumped on the bandwagon because we've been performing the services, but it was like, let's put a name with it. I have seen things all across the board. Yours is like pure play vCISO. I'm very proud. I like what I see with what you're doing. Ours, because I do wear several hats. I am one of the vCISOs that work with some of our clients, but I also still do project work. I still do assessments, analysis, whatever. Misconceptions, I would say, and I'm thinking of a certain situation whenever they had hired us for like our basic service, which is basically, let's get you rolling. Let's get you onboarded. Let's, go from here. And then typically if you want XYZ above that, that might be a case of extra hours or extra, contract, whatever, because it's not a retainer type situation. And the one person, he automatically assumed, since he bought this entry level service for not that much, that we were his like pure play CISO. It's like, it doesn't work that way. You still own the risk, and it's like, even with a CISO of an organization, a vCISO is the same when it comes to, we can help identify the risk. We can help identify the things that need to be done within your organization. We can make recommendations. We can find the 2-3 year plan or whatever that shows those tasks and the things that need to be done. But it's your job to accept that risk where you want to accept it, and your job to mitigate it where you want to mitigate it. And we're here for the advice to kind of walk you in the right path. But at the end of the day, we don't work as your CISO.
Well, I love that line. You still own the risk, and I think that so many times you get organizations and push back if you feel differently, but I don't think you do. It's like so many times that you get organizations that they feel that as soon as they contract with someone in that security space, then all of a sudden the risk is magically taken care of, but it isn't, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But this gets down now to what we in the industry term loosely, I think we could do a better job with it, but we say risk appetite. We say, well, what is your risk appetite? It's very difficult for organizations to quantify that, but I'm curious. Let's look about different industries here, because I know you guys work in a lot of spaces. You and I have worked together with a common client that I won't mention, but that's how you and I first got introduced to each other. What do you see as far as like differences in risk appetite between some of the other industries out there, particularly like some of the ones that are more higher regulated, like banking and credit union and healthcare, versus some of the not so highly regulated?
Wow, I appreciate the question, but it is so broad on what I've seen. It is like, oh my gosh. I've seen some organizations that when they have the proper tone at the top, when they have the understanding from leadership that we don't want to be on the front page of the paper, we don't want to have regulatory fines against us, and they push that down through the organization and have the right people in there, they tend to understand, and they still have a risk appetite. They have to understand they're not going to spend, $500,000 to fix a $100,000 risk, but they need to understand what makes sense. So those organizations I love to work with, and I love to work with them all. But those, it's like, I don't feel like I'm banging my head against the wall. There was another organization that a previous leader there would use the term that, I'm not going to say the exact term because I don't want to rat them out, but he would say something to the effect of, they don't, they're not like, they don't have a brick of gold, that everybody's trying to get. They don't have anything to lose, and would never do anything when it comes to security. And so later on, years came down the path, and I'm working with one of our account managers, and this client, they were wanting to look at different things. And I said, I really don't know what they have. I've never worked with them. Would it make sense to do a baseline vulnerability and penetration assessment? Let's just find out where they are, because until you know where they are, it's hard to recommend anything. So he said, oh no, he goes, I understand in the past, they said they think that's hokum and they don't want to do that. I said, yeah, but it's different people now. So when I mentioned it to the person on a call, I just said, hey, how did you perform on your last security assessment, vulnerability assessment? I was just trying to throw some words out there and he said, it's funny you asked that. He said, we've never had one done. And he said, however, that was when the last person was here and he didn't think it was important. He goes, I realize now that I own this risk. And he said, I realize now that I need to have some things done. So tell me a little bit more about that. So I did. And once I did, we put a proposal together. It was a pretty broad, pretty wide engagement. And when it came time to present, usually what I'll do is I'll go on site, I'll present the findings. I do it in a technical or executive, but with a technical format as well. Make sure that it doesn't matter if you're a CEO or if you're a, entry-level data entry person, or if you're an engineer, you're going to understand what I'm presenting. At least that's my hope. And the CFO was in there, the one with the checkbook. With the money. And I thought, but it was very refreshing because he worked with that previous person and he works with the person now who understands risk. It got to the end of the presentation and I had presented him the report. I'm starting to throw my laptop, back in my bag and all that stuff. And everybody else went on downstairs and he hung around in the boardroom. And I had told him early on, I said, I'm going to start with executive speak. I said, but when I get into the geek speak, you all are welcome to leave if it's just not in your area. And he stayed the whole time. And after it
That's a
was
good
over, it was a
sign.
really good, it was. So
Yeah.
after it was over, I thought, uh-oh, what'd I do? He said, I hung around because I want to talk to you. And I said, sure. I said, what's going on? He said, when this proposal came across my desk, it was a lot of money. And he said, and I have to approve things. He said, so I was really hesitant about it because in the past, we never wanted to do these type of things. He goes, now that I've seen what you did, I've sat here through this presentation. He goes, I can tell you it was worth every single penny. And I was like, it made me feel so good because I thought, oh, he's not mad. But it was also a case to where I was able to help them find different gaps that they didn't even know they had. And since then, we've worked with them on different things. And I would say that their risk level has gone from here to here. It's like they're looking at their gaps, they're clearing things out. And I would, if I were to do a pen test there right now, I probably wouldn't find much. And I've always said a boring pen test is a good pen test, as
Right.
long as you know what's going on.
Well,
But,
and just the concept of like getting names associated with risk. It's amazing how their eyes light up and they change. It's like, what do you mean I own that risk? It's like, don't you? It's no. I'm just even a CISO in a large organization, and some might dispute this a little bit, but this is my show and therefore my opinion.
Hey, I'm with you.
It's I'm laying down some rules here. It's just like the CISO, generally speaking, doesn't own the risk, but the CISO is so responsible for being able to evaluate and communicate the risk effectively so that those who do own the risk can make risk-informed decisions. And that's a part that's often missed. But when we get to that point, or getting to that point, as you just indicated a little earlier back when we were talking, you used the saying of banging your head against the wall, which is a method of saying that our industry can be very stressful. And it's often that stress, we don't take care of it the way that we should. I'm a big proponent on this podcast that we need to have positive outlets for our stresses and to help become like more well-rounded. I mean, you can't work at your A game if you let this stuff really eat you inside. So, Brad, what's one of the things you do to decompress from the stresses of our very stressful field?
I know a lot of people in the industry wouldn't agree with this, but I know a lot of the, especially the younger generation, because they still have that hunger and desire. I still have the hunger, but I'm also realistic. A lot of the younger folks are like, they'll listen to Darknet Diaries. They listen to this, they follow this. And it's great. I love it that they're always, always be learning, which is awesome. I've gotten to a point to where I needed to have some good work-life balance. So it's like, I think about work situations when I'm out, when I'm gone, but I tend to listen to crime novels. I mean, I do audiobooks a lot while I'm driving, and it's not uncommon. I'll listen to Jack Reacher. I'll listen to the Tanner series. There's various ones as opposed to, IT and security stuff. Now, I definitely still subscribe to various, like emails, news feeds, things like that. But that's
including this podcast, of course.
Including this podcast, that's for sure. And if you haven't signed up for the Greg Schaffer vCISO podcast, I'm going to do this for you right now. Get out there and do it right now. But other than that, it's like, we've talked about our age. I had a special name I was going to call our podcast, but I won't say it. But anyway, we've talked about that. And, my kids are grown. My wife and I have been married 40 years. My daughter's, up in her upper 30s. The boys are in the mid 30s. And I've got 7 grandkids. So to unwind, 3 of them live right next door to us. 2 of them are up in northern Indiana, and 2 of them are in not very far away. So as much as I can see family, grandkids, all of that, that's my unwind. I just like to do things like that. Of course, I'm also I don't do it as much as I would like, but if you've heard of the Big Green Egg, I love barbecue. I love smoking pork butts and various things, and I have 3 Big Green Eggs. And some people say it's a habit, but
Big
I'm a-
green egg. I'll have to look that up. So what kind
oh
of
yeah,
future
it's
plans you got coming up? More barbecue?
future plans. Yeah, more barbecue. So I mean, outside of work, I'm a Rotarian, so I go to Warwick County Rotary Club, and we get involved with the community, anything from scholarships and education, volunteering. We just got finished with a soup kitchen last week, and that's always fulfilling because you're giving back. But as far as future plans, we do have so the average tenure at Keller Schroeder. I didn't say much about that, but we've been around since 1978, and we have about 105. We're an employee-owned company, so we have about 105 employee owners, somewhere around there. The average tenure is 17 years. So we have people my age, we have people older than me, we have a lot of
Wow.
young people coming through. And part of my next several years is just making sure I don't like hoard any tribal knowledge I might have. I'm trying to pass along some of that. I'm trying to, as the young guys come in, I'm trying to let them take over some of the things that I used to do. And so my primary focus right now is more on the governance side, anything from the vCISO services to, compliance and governance assistance, just consulting in general. And whenever I got hired here, I told the person that hired me, I said, my goal is to be replaced. My goal is to be replaceable so that when I leave the company, people miss me for who I am, but they don't miss, oh crap, he took all this information with him. What are we going to do now? So I want to make sure that Keller Schroeder, survives,
Yeah.
is that I'm not like leaving anybody in a lurch. We have a program called a boomerang program, which because we have a staffing division, it's not uncommon that some of our clients and us will have somebody retire, which I plan to do probably in 5 or 6 years. But when they retire, it's not uncommon that this boomerang program will reach out to them and say, hey, XYZ company still wants you to come work for them. When are you available? And then you get to say, well, how about 2 days a week, no more than 6 hours a day? And they'll hire you right back in as either a 1099, W-2, whatever, and it's boomerang because they're bringing you right back. So
You can
who knows? I
write
may
your
end
own
up doing
terms
that if
and
I get bored.
you can write your own terms almost at that point in time. Well, Brad, it's been wonderful catching up with you.
Yeah.
The next time I'm in the Evansville area, we need to do some coffee and try to get them to finish that I-69 project, because that's going to cut like 15 minutes off the commute from the south going through there. But
Absolutely.
I've been following that actually on their socials. I'm fascinated with that construction, how it's going. But
yeah,
wonderful catching up. Sorry we couldn't have caught up when you were down here for InfoSec last week, but we'll catch up next time I'm up there.
Of course. I'd look forward to it.
And everybody, stay secure.